And the voting process of the election Speaker of the National Assembly is now starting. We'll certainly go back to it as soon as the process has been completed. But for now, let's bring in political analyst Mr. Levi Ndo and Dr. Ntsikelelo Breakfast. Gentlemen, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the agenda.
Good morning, Simpiwe. Good morning, Dr. Breakfast.
Okay, we seem to have a problem connecting to Dr. Breakfast, but we'll continue with you, Mr. Ndo. Clearly, it is a big day in Parliament, not only because the Speaker will be elected, but because the ANC's nominated candidate, Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula, will not be getting the support from the opposition benches. Just how significant is today's election, Mr. Ndo?
Well, firstly, Simpiwe, one must say, I'm actually not taken by surprise by the events taking place, because the intentions of the ANC have always been clear. We all knew that the ANC had actually earmarked Nqakula to become the Speaker of the National Assembly. But also at the same time, I think from the nominators in Parliament, I have a sense that the idea seemed to have been that of ensuring that the women in South Africa are represented, and there seemed to have been some sort of pressure that came from the ANC Women's League. Hence, I had the motivation by the seconder, Mezulu, saying that forward with women's power forward. That for me sent a message that maybe the Women's League had a role to play. But as you have indicated, Simpiwe, this would be followed by some form of controversy, as it has actually been alluded to by members of the opposition, and the response that you actually get from the public in general. And that is also not coming as a surprise. But that for me will require the ANC itself to respond to how they receive the message. Whether the ANC will say, it is fine, we go ahead with our plans, or the ANC would say, what the people are actually saying and how they've actually responded to our proposal of coming up with Nqakula has not been well received. Maybe we can still be able to find ways and means to amend where we've actually done wrong.
Dr. Breakfast, let me also welcome you into this conversation. The fact that Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula is not her nomination as Parliament Speaker is not well received by the opposition benches. Will this frosty relationship translate into voting for somebody else? Because you know that there's deep divisions within the ANC, and we understand that the decision to nominate Mapisa-Nqakula did not come from the ANC Parliamentary Caucus, but from the ANC in Luthuli House.
I think in as much as there is a sense of unhappiness amongst ANC members about the way things are, that the way things are is not the way things should be. I think a lot of people were taken aback about how the name was imposed on them when the chairperson of the ANC held a caucus meeting. I think there is a sense that he basically bulldozed the democratic processes by not allowing members of the caucus to express their views about the person in question. But on the other hand, it must be borne in mind that the ANC subscribes to a Leninist organizational model, which embraces the conception of democratic centralism, party discipline, that a decision that is made by the highest decision-making body, all members of the party have to abide by that. And if they don't do that, that is normally described as being ill-disciplined. So I expect the ANC to basically vote in favor of its candidate. Yes, there might be few ANC members who might not carry the mandate, but on the whole, I think ANC members, because of they know what is expected of them, they are going to carry the mandate. But what is interesting is that there is something symbolic about the fact that the DA has also put forward a candidate, because that signifies that they know the role that they need to play as an official opposition, that they need to provide oversight over the institution of parliament. So in the final analysis, in as much as members of parliament are going to vote in private, but I expect Mama Nosi Piwe Ngakula to win.
No, Dr. Breakfast, I'm particularly interested in that point you made around democratic centralism. And I mean, it suffices to mention that this apparent and alleged abuse of parliamentary power, would you attribute it to the so-called democratic centralism?
Look, I think there are two main line of arguments here. On the one hand, we need to remember that whether you like it or not, all members of parliament are there through the ticket of their political parties. Had it not been for those parties, they would never have been there in the first place. So that must be noted. But the flip side of the coin is that they are there to serve the nation, not to serve the interest of their own political parties. So I think striking the balance between the two sometimes is a bit of a challenge. Whether you like it or not, at the end of the day, politics is a game's numbers. You know, it's about the numbers. After all, the party that has the numbers is the one that is able to entrench its dominance and be able to provide a direction to the country.
Now, Mr. Ndo, obviously we know that Parliament, or the role of Parliament, is to serve the interest of the country, not only the interest of a certain party in Parliament. And with the election, well, with the nomination of Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula, just picking up on the point that I made earlier on, that, there's been reports that the decision to nominate her was not taken by the ANC caucus in Parliament, but rather by the ANC, by the parent body, the ANC in Luthuli House. Then it says a lot about the impartiality of the Speaker. So how likely are we to see the impartiality of the Speaker, which is very central to the values of the institution called Parliament?
Well, Simpiwe, I think let me add on what Dr. Breakfast was saying. The fact of the matter is that the members of parliament are in parliament because they are sent by their political parties. That is point number one. Point number two, political parties would then have to make a determination on who is then supposed to be deployed in many different positions, either in parliament, either in other sectors of government, or any other way. Political parties have got that responsibility to take. Another aspect that we need to look at as well is that because political parties go to parliament and get represented proportional, obviously the political party that will have more numbers would actually take advantage of that, first of all, and then take responsibility to deploy whoever they want to deploy. Indeed, it is true that members of parliament, when they're in parliament, they actually have to work in the best interests of all citizens and ensure that whatever decisions that they take are in the best interest of everybody and not in the interest of the party. But that is actually what is actually being said. In practice, it is not the case, because politicians would always take mandate from their own political parties. Now, when we come to the issue of whether the decision is taken by the caucus or whether the decision is imposed, that talks to the political party dynamics. Whether the decision is taken when people are seated in Cape Town, in the legislative benches, or whether the decision is taken at Lutuli House, might not necessarily matter. What would matter is that the party has actually taken a decision that has to be followed. And of course, there are internal party dynamics and contestation. Some would actually not have preferred Ngapula to take over. Some would have come with, might have loved someone to be nominated. And at the end of the day, the party has to have its own position that has to be presented. The unfortunate part that we have is that opposition parties, ordinary citizens, would also love to see themselves having an influence in these processes. And unfortunately, there are instances that their views might be accepted, and there are instances where their views might not be accepted. And in this case, the views of ordinary citizens, unfortunately, might not be heard, because the party would then have to take a decision which has to be implemented in the short space of time like we actually have now. But the challenge remains that when you're elected as the Speaker of the House, you need to ensure that you treat all members equally, and whatever decision that you take should always be in the best interests of South Africa, and you must always ensure that you put South Africa and its citizens first.
Now, Mr. Ndo, what is the danger of the oversight role of Parliament being severely compromised by a member of the executive? Well, in this particular instance, in the case of Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula, a former member of the executive being made Speaker?
Well, this takes us to a debate of an egg and a chicken. The issue as well is that you have got ministers who are politicians. You have got people that are elected in other different positions who are actually politicians. But I think what we need to focus on now, which is supposed to be the challenge for Nqakula, is to be able to remove the cap of being a minister and take over the cap of being the Speaker of the National Assembly, and ensure that there is a sufficient accountability, and ensuring that departments actually adhere to the rules and regulations of the responsibilities given to them by the president. Of course, you would still have a lot of people coming up with concerns that you hear is someone who's coming from a department. What then will be her role when there's supposed to be an element of accountability, specifically coming from that department, and where she was actually responsible in running or as being the political head of that department. And of course, this is where now the character and the courage of an individual has to be outstanding, and she must ensure that there is sufficient accountability, and where wrongdoing has actually taken place, she must take a lead in ensuring that wrongs are actually corrected.
Dr. Breakfast, the EFF, which is by far the second biggest opposition party, indicated that they will not be taking part in the election of the Speaker. Well, they may not be the biggest party with the numbers, but how big of a setback will it be for Mapisa-Nqakula's chances of election?
Like I said earlier on, that one of the responsibilities of opposition parties is to consolidate democracy, or is to strengthen democracy. So the EFF should be commended for a good job well done, that if they are unhappy about the state of affairs, they can walk away from Parliament and not be part of that. I think they are conveying a message of unhappiness, and it contributes, to this sense of unhappiness, across the political spectrum, that there's something wrong with the name that has been put forward. So personally, I don't see anything wrong with what the EFF has done.
Well, I asked Mr. Ndou about whether the oversight role of Parliament will be compromised if, for argument's sake, Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula does indeed get the role. But will the integrity of Parliament then be tainted, being led by somebody who ostensibly does not espouse the principles of accountability and transparency required to lead the parliamentary institution?
Of course not. I'll tell you why. Because in theory, a speaker is expected to be, objective, someone that commands a great deal of respect amongst his or her colleagues. So because this person might ascend to this position under a cloud of allegations, serious ones though, I think that does cast aspersions about her capabilities to get the job done. That if she could not perform well previously as a person who held the position of Minister of Defense, how will she at the moment get the job done? Meaning that she's not fit and proper to execute her duties. But I think in terms of the constitutional provisions, she does tick the boxes, because one of the boxes that one has to tick is that in order to be the speaker, according to, I think, Section 52 of the Constitution, you must have been the member of Parliament. So I think she does tick that box. But like I said earlier on, that politics at the end of the day is about numbers game.
Now, Mr. Ndou, we know that the office of the Speaker has traditionally been held by ANC members for decades. Will this not, in hindsight, perhaps signal the transfer of decision-making powers from Parliament to the ANC leaders, who may instruct its MPs to act in a certain way?
Well, the unfortunate part, Simpiwe, is that we have the Constitution. And the Constitution says the Speaker should come amongst members of Parliament. There is no way that you are going to get members of Parliament who are not sent to Parliament by political parties. So if that is why now you have got a contestation. You have got the ANC having made a nomination, you have got the DA having made a nomination. So maybe the same question, some would say, if the speakership goes to the person nominated by the DA, is that person going to be taking instructions from the DA? I think what we need to look at is that politicians in their nature, knowing that they would always ensure that they take mandate from their people, there are instances where politicians have to ensure that even though they are sent by their own political parties, they need to work in the best interest of everyone. A speaker is someone who is supposed to rise above political party interest and ensure that he or she is there to serve all political parties and by extension, serving the entire South African population. The speaker is supposed to ensure that parliamentary processes and activities are actually running smoothly and ensuring that the programs of Parliament are actually implemented properly in the interest of all of us. So if you have a speaker who would actually be bound to party political activities and not ensure that the interest of the entire nation is served, then we'll actually be having a speaker who is actually providing disservice to all of us. And indeed, political parties that will then have to nominate and send individuals in these positions of responsibility should actually ensure that they do proper screening and send right people who would actually work in the interest of all of us. I know that it is not a very easy thing to do, but it requires maturity. It requires someone who will be able to say, at times, I'm going to differ with members of my own political party, but I must actually do my best to ensure that South Africa and all the processes and systems that are in place are supposed to be done in a proper manner. That is exactly what all of us would expect from the speaker. If you have a speaker who would actually be bound to smaller activities outside his role as a Speaker of Parliament, we might end up in a situation where the work of Parliament is frustrated, and indeed, as a nation, will end up being lost.
Now, there is reports which to this point remain allegations that she received about 5 million rand of, in hard cash and in gifts from a South African National Defence Force contractor while she was still Defence Minister at that time. So how likely will members of Parliament, hold her to account as Defence Minister as they are constitutionally mandated to do so?
This is where you need the maturity of an individual. This is, for me, one specific area that might make or break Ngabula. I think it is time for her to take South Africans into confidence and explain herself so that she must then be able to execute her responsibilities without any form of a cloud over her head. Those that are opposed to a nomination, most of them are raising this kind of issues. But also at the same time, you need politicians in South Africa to be matured enough and at some point refuse positions of responsibility when they know that they are tainted, because that actually has a negative impact. It has a negative impact on the party that she represents. It also has a negative impact on the institution that one is supposed to be serving on. So you need politicians to, at some point, come forward and assist the nation to move forward. Allegations are there, and I hope she's aware of these allegations, and I think she must be the first person to take South Africa into confidence and clear this cloud so that she must be able to execute her responsibilities well without any errors going towards a direction.
Dr. Breakfast, your thoughts on this? If she is indeed elected as parliamentary speaker, how likely will she be in a position to use that particular position to shield her from parliamentary scrutiny if all allegations hanging above her head are elevated to a status of effect?
Well, I think at the moment, the jury is still out. It's still early days, though. Let's adopt the wait and see approach on that score in terms of how these issues are going to play themselves out in public. I don't want to play the cart before the horse, but I want to concur with Utatundo that it is incumbent upon leaders to refuse to accept positions of authority when they are being accused of serious allegations of corruption.
And how likely will the members of parliament receive her?
Well, I mean, you can see even at the moment, even though she has not been elected to be the speaker as yet, that people are casting aspersions on her capabilities to perform her responsibilities, meaning that, you know, there will be a sense of unhappiness, you know, questioning the fact that why was she the one that was proposed by the ruling party? But, you know, I think people will have to abide by the orders of the party at the end of the day.
Now, Mr. Ndo, in advanced democracies where voter sentiment is highly respected and highly regarded, the fact that they cannot, impose a candidate who is highly compromised at a public platform such as this one. So do you think, or do you get a sense that the ANC is quite cognizant of the fact that most South Africans, in particular South African or rather ANC voters, will not be at all pleased with the election of Nosiviwe Mpisangqakula as a speaker?
Yes, indeed. Obviously, you would get some within and outside the ANC who might not be happy with the nomination of Mpisangqakula based on her performance as the minister and also based on the allegations that people are actually talking about right now. But I think it's also important to note that you have got the ANC dynamics at play here, in the sense that the ANC is the one that has been talking about ensuring that women are represented and they're also given positions of responsibility. And if you look at the power dynamics within the ANC, the ANC Women's League is also supposed to get a share in terms of positions. And obviously, it must actually go to senior members within the ANC Women's League. Also, at the same time, you have got allegations that are being leveled against Mpisangqakula. And the unfortunate part is that she seemed to be saying, I am clean, there is nothing against me, and I can still occupy any position. That actually puts everybody in a very, very difficult situation. And of course, we just have to wait for her to actually come out clean. But everything still goes back to the ANC to say, to which extent do they ensure that their members are not tainted? How do they ensure that they bring in candidates that will easily be accepted by all South Africans, if not by the majority? How do they also ensure that whatever decision that they take would actually be easily accepted by all the people? That becomes a challenge to most political parties that are in power. And it is up to the senior members of the ANC to ensure that the screening process within the party is done in a manner that everybody or the citizens by extension will then be able to say, our party has actually best provided the best candidates that they could. It is not easy, but that is the task that every party has to go through. Another challenge that we have, Simpiwe, is that we've got an assumption as a society that leaders would actually be very open with each other. And we think that because these people are in the same political party, they share all the information surrounding themselves. And that is actually not true. And that means that political parties sometimes can deploy someone that they think is best for them whilst they're actually deploying the worst candidate.
Well, the EFF, Mr. Ndo, has decided to be non-committal on the election of the National Assembly Speaker, while the DA, the EFF says that it's now seeking legal advice on where to from here, while on the other hand, the DA says that, this is a complete mockery of the Constitution and of the parliamentary integrity. Are we likely to see a litany of litigation coming the Parliament's way?
Well, that can also be possible. Also looking at the fact that there is also other groupings in society that have actually written to the Deputy Speaker about their worries or concerns about the nomination of Ngakula. EFF is represented in Parliament, and the EFF will actually, on numerous occasions, adopt the strategy or the stance that they think is best for them.